Ding! Bring out your dad. There you go.
So, would you mind leading a quick Q&A session and see if anybody has questions?
By the way, I just gotta say, who else is finding what could be the most boring story of computers and internet history in the whole world? Who else is finding it freakishly interesting? Because I'm doing such a good job.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate that.
Well done.
Fascinating.
All right. Hey, no eating on stage. That's
Yeah.
really
Well, I didn't realize that we were already finished our break. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, by the way, for those of you who are Jays in the group like me, here's the plan. Here's the plan every day.
Myers-Briggs J.
The plan is we're going to try to eat lunch roughly around, lunchtime. And then we are going to try to end the day here each day at roughly 4:30-ish. Today we'll probably aim for 4:30 right on the nose. Tomorrow we're going to have to graduate here, so we'll probably try to end everything by 4:30 and then graduate. Because we want to get back to dinner at Wizard Academy, not dinner here. So at least we have some time hanging out in the tower, being back on campus like we all know and love. Right. Now this is amazing, and it's mainly for the people who couldn't make it, like you guys. Right. So we'll try to end by 4:30 today and get right. And we're going to take a class photo right before we leave today. And then we'll get back on the bus. And if you need a ride, I've got more seats in my van as well. If you want to do dinner with us, we're heading that way. But that puts us right at the very beginning of true rush hour traffic heading south to the academy. So that's why we want to try to get out early. We wait till 5:30. It'll take 45 minutes to an hour to get back to the academy. So that's the goal. Tomorrow, same thing, same pickup time. And we'll get started right away tomorrow, so that we have plenty of time for questions if we can get to them. Right? And I think does that help? Does that help you?
Thank you, Jay.
Have a plan? All other J's and the beat test? You didn't give a shit about any of that?
Nope.
It's fine. All right, thanks, guys.
All right. This came up during the break. Does anybody here know how Prodigy died? No, I know a few people here already mentioned the answer too. But this is kind of a fun little research thing, and this ties into the whole growth of networks, of proprietary networks, and their fall. Prodigy died in 1999. And this is the first casualty we actually discovered of Y2K. So what happened with Prodigy was their user base peaked in around 95, 96, and then from that point on, growth of AOL and the individual ISPs all took over, and people just connected directly to the internet. And so fewer and fewer people were using Prodigy Classic with all of their jump words. And at that point, they decided that we don't have enough users on our network anymore, and it's going to cost a fortune to port all of our code to make sure that it's Y2K compliant, so we're just going to close. So tying this back together, just the quick summary, we end up with this, government is afraid that a nuclear bomb is going to wipe out like all of our data, and our entire military will be useless unless we can figure out how to distribute it. This network grows and eventually encompasses every connected device in the world. And in the process, there were a few pioneers who decided they would create their own networks like Prodigy and AOL and give people access to vast amounts of information. And eventually they go the wayside, and we go from these curated walled gardens into you could say a democratic meritocracy created by algorithms and search engines. And from that point on, because everything is now a meritocracy, everybody tries to compete. Some people compete well and compete trying to play by the rules, and others don't. And for the ones who don't, it's been an arms race between the PhDs at Google and the hackers. And luckily for all of us who are trying to actually use Google for useful things, like finding best jewelers or finding a church.
Or cats.
Or cats. Currently the PhDs at Google are winning, and so now we're continuing on with a journey into like how natural language processing works, and so how we detect people who are trying to game the system, and also at the same time how we can help the algos identify the content that you write as actually good quality content.
Thank you. As I'm sure you've all probably picked up on at this point, the crux of this talk is technical, but not for developers or engineers. I'm not going to shy away from math for you guys, but I'm not going to shy away from it because I respect y'all. But I will present it in ways that that I hope you'll find comprehensible and accessible. The trick is that I know that probably none of you are going to use this information to build natural language systems, although you could, and if you want to, by all means, let's chat. But you should probably, and you would probably like to know how the people who build them, so that you can use that information for both your business and your personal edification. So I mentioned earlier that that we've been talking a lot about NLP, and it's kind of funny that it's like we're already at this point in the course. We haven't actually talked about what NLP is. We've talked about natural language processing, but we've thrown the term around, but we haven't actually defined it. And the reason is that there are a lot of terms in it that carry a lot of weight, a lot of sort of philosophical / cognitive burden. Natural language and processing are all a pretty complicated thing. But we do know, each of us in this room have some idea of what natural language processing means. So by a show of hands, like how many people use their phone's voice commands? Pretty much everybody. How many people have voice assistants in their home, like Alexa or Siri, for example? They're coming into our homes. They're in there. What have you found it useful at all? Like, yeah, it's I know Cedric has Alexa at his place and he uses it all the time. Yeah. It, her, them, whatever. Anyway, I honestly wouldn't know what I would do other than, like, you know, Alexa, play with my cat. But the but you know, it does have its uses.
Yeah, Alexa's been getting deaf lately. One of the best stories, and I just have to throw this in. One morning we had a lazy, Becca and I had a lazy morning, and I was like, Alexa, turn on my wife. And Alexa's response was, there are several things that share that name. Which one do you want?
Oh my. Whoa. So. You're Mormon. Yeah.
She grew up in Utah.
Let me just go through a couple of things that I thought of off the top of my head of what people use natural language for in the use of, like in the context of modern computer usage. Obviously, spell check, spelling and grammar check, so that we don't look illiterate when we're communicating to other people. Oh, I see. The order is different. We can automatic translation is good enough nowadays that we can actually communicate to people who don't even speak our language pretty fluidly with Google Translate. I've personally found it incredibly useful. I've got a cousin of mine in Russia who's trying to learn who's trying to learn JavaScript, and he heard about this, cousin in America that that is a programmer, and that, like, gosh, maybe you can, like, help me out, get started, whatever. And my Russian's pretty good, but I'm when it comes to typing, like, I'm a hunt and peck typer, and, like, I have to enunciate my words when I read them. So, like, it's not enough. It's not good enough for, like, having deep, involved conversations about, like, about technical topics. So the only way he and I communicate. Oh, and of course he speaks no English. So the only way he and I are able to communicate is through Google Translate, and it's just great. Like,
I use it with my Kung Fu coach all the time for scheduling. So I'll be like, my trainer is running half an hour late. Can we start later, or like at 12:30? And so I will punch that line into Google Translate. It will give me Mandarin, which I copy and paste into iMessage. Then he responds, and then I can either play that, and I have some understanding of Chinese, but I don't know the written. So then I'll copy his response back into Google Translate and see what it was in English.
As I mentioned earlier, when describing contextualization, the Google search bar is actually capable of answering very basic questions through their snippet system. So I can type in, how old is the oldest person? And it says in plain English, the oldest man who ever lived has been blah, blah, blah. So the second oldest man who has ever lived is, as of, what's the date today, the 20th? Yeah. Is within 5 days of the world record. So next week we'll see if Mr. Tanaka makes it. Nice. Right? So as I already mentioned, we issue basic agents. Sorry, we issue basic commands to intelligent agents. I personally never talk to my phone except for one thing, which is setting alarms. And for some reason, the user interface for setting alarms is much easier by voice than by entering the clock system. A little bit more, probably a little bit less common usage by users, but incredibly ubiquitous in the corporate world is sentiment analysis. How many of y'all know what sentiment analysis is? What is sentiment analysis?
Basically, seeing if something is received positively or negatively, like if you're talking about social media text and how people respond to it, reading the language, if it's a positive statement or a negative statement, how does that reflect on?
Exactly. What are the what kind of people? What was that? Yes. So sorry. Oh, that's right. The talking ball. We forgot the talking box. Sentiment analysis is a way for machines to gauge whether people on the internet are speaking positively or negatively about a subject. And this comes up hugely in the corporate world, because if you are a marketing director, for example, or if you manage the publicity for some company or organization, you will want to pay for a sentiment analysis service that scans Twitter, for example, for mentions of your product or your brands, and it can automatically produce a real-time report saying, like, people have like 79% approve, 5% disapprove, 2% are just confused. It's honestly pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, we can take a statement like, we had an amazing experience with working with our technician Brad from Radiant Plumbing. He arrived at our home on time and was quick and efficient, and our toilet doesn't leak anymore. And so you can take words like amazing time or quick and efficient and say, okay, these words have positive values. Alternatively, you can have a statement that says that I will never use Radiant Plumbing again. The technician was incredibly rude. And based on the negative words, we can judge that statement as being negative. And then taken as a whole, if we take like 50 reviews or hundreds of reviews, you can start to plot the shape you can create a curve and say that, okay, something happened in June that caused our review sentiment to plummet, and then later we find out that one bad technician.
I like the example that you brought up because an NLP system would that really scores well on sentiment, on being able to analyze sentiment, needs to be able to differentiate a review that says we will never use XYZ brand versus we will never use anyone but XYZ brand. That's hard. That's really hard. The trick is and this is a secret that'll come up later. These things don't have to work all that well. We're going to talk about the Pareto principle, and otherwise known as the 80-20 rule. It might flag sentiments wrong every now and then. It's okay. As long as you've got a huge amount of data, it all comes out in the wash. I do want to share a story from colleagues of mine about sentiment analysis. This was roughly in 2001 or 2 or so, before sentiment analysis was a thing. I knew a couple of folks who ultimately went to the University of Chicago who came up with the idea of feeding the quarterly earnings reports of companies through a neural network. And what they were specifically training these guys for, everybody else had previously trained these things on trying to pull out grammatical structures and understand and develop some sort of comprehension of the material and other stuff that will graze over the course of this course. But what these guys came up with was none of that matters. When you read a quarterly earnings report, you only care about one thing. Later that day, did the stock of the company go up or did it go down? They trained this thing to predict how humans will receive this report. And the trick is that by modern standards, what they did was incredibly primitive. They're only recognizing 1 or 2 word sequences at a time, but it doesn't matter because what happens when a human reads it is that we're not actually all there when we're reading it either, because every investor who gets that QE report is trying to get ahead of every other investor who's reading that QE report. So they're just skimming it too. So this machine can skim it faster than any human possibly could, and the moment that QE report comes out, is able to say buy or sell. These guys got really rich. Lastly, so this is still very much in experimental. It's still very much in research. Automatic summarization. Basically taking a block of text, a document or a web page, and just culling it down to its bare essentials. At the simplest, this could involve stuff like removing adjectives. That'll make it shorter. It might lose a little bit of meaning, but if you're just skimming, it'll get the gist. More advanced systems try to glean a couple of key sentences that summarize the entire thing, and they can basically tell what's a load-bearing sentence, so to speak, versus what are support sentences. But like I said, this is yes, please. Oh yeah, bling.
Does this mean we should make our content short and sweet?
You should absolutely make your content short and sweet. But the reason actually gets into maximizing the ratio of stuff you want to say to total length of document. I've got a little side project called Word Trimmer that involves trying to cater to novelists, and this is still very much under development. I don't want to imply anything, but the idea is that publishers of novels will tell you that your a short novel will always sell much faster than a long one. People have a finite attention span, and they want to see. They just want you to say your thing, and you'd be shocked at how much a person can put, how much an audience or reader can put together based on you honestly saying very little. Humans are smart, and I'll get into that too. I actually will. But my point is that it's sort of a joke in the publishing industry that every manuscript you have can be reduced by about 5%. And that is true for manuscripts that you have just reduced by 5%. So at the end of the day, it's amazing how little you have to say. And I'll stop talking right there. There is a common thread across all of these things that I've listed. And this is a thread that ties into the story that I told about my acquaintances from the University of Chicago. Anybody spot what that thread is? Let me go over these again. You answer questions by pulling answers from text written by other humans. Translation helps us communicate with humans. Spelling and grammar check helps us not look illiterate in front of other humans. Sentiment analysis gauge what mood others are speaking about us in. You're getting the gist, right? The machine isn't doing squat. The machine is merely trying to guess what other humans are doing relative to us humans producing content. Even the issuing of basic commands still ultimately depends on the small set of commands that, a small set of instructions that human engineers have put into the machine for you to command it to do. We're going to, I would like to clarify that we'll be talking about natural language, a subset of natural language processing that's referred in the industry to natural language understanding. There's a lot that, like if you read the Wikipedia site for NLP, and you're not on neuro-linguistic programming, then you'll read that NLU is a subset of NLP. In the real world, nobody ever talks about NLP other than NLU. But there's a few caveats that I want to cover first. What I'm referring to primarily is applying computation to natural text. That's text that's been formatted for human consumption into titles, sentences, and paragraphs. Occasionally little blurbs, little pull quotes, whatever. This is the kind of data that the web is almost entirely made of. This is what search engines index. This is the underlying assumption that we all take for granted when we're talking about SEO and web navigation and all that. There is ongoing research into visual indexing of images and videos. And the video stuff is interesting because because there's speech in video, it also dovetails with NLP. But the speech that's in video has to be converted to text, and then you apply algorithms to the text. So ultimately, it all still boils down to this text stuff, and that's why we're here today. Explicitly out of scope that I know some of you might be curious about, watch, half the room leaves, is voice or speech recognition. The reason this is specifically the subset of natural language processing that involves taking sound waves in and putting words out. It's actually something that was once upon a time near and dear to my heart. My first job out of college was at Microsoft Speech, building a very, very early version of a system that eventually has become Cortana. So I want to speak a little bit about what this is so that I know what you're not getting. So that you know what you're not getting, rather. Device commands such as, I don't want to say the wake word. So-and-so set alarm for 7 a.m. The recognition quality when issuing commands is aided by a very small, limited vocabulary. There are only so many things you can tell this thing to do, and only so many different structures of command that you tell it to do it in. So that makes the voice processing computationally tractable. Dictation systems tend to have very poor performance. When you're trying to dictate a document by voice to Siri, it has trouble keeping up. And you're going to be correcting her errors more often than not. And the reason is that she's got no limitation, well, not no, but insufficient limitation on subject matter. There are custom-built, there are companies providing custom-built dictation engines for boutique industries, such as medical dictation. That's actually a really burgeoning field right now, where to provide doctors with ways to, with systems that will automatically transcribe their voice notes. That's a particularly important field right now because a huge amount of doctors' time is spent writing down aspects about their patient, and not enough time spending, working with the patient or, or practicing medicine. So that's something that's going to be that's currently on the horizon, and you'll be seeing more of in the next couple of years. And also, in recent years, voice recognition has been used for looking things up on, by command on your phones or your home assistants. The common thread with all of this, where it enters our scope of awareness, is that at the end of the day, the way that search terms get into the search engine is what we care about. We don't care about how they got in there. We just care about what the search engine does with the search terms when they're in there. So from our point of view, I'm generally regarding speech recognition to be a means to an end. Whether you typed the search terms or spoke them or telepathically beamed them to the search engine, it doesn't matter. So, whether you're speaking or typing or telepathing to your computer. By the way, are you guys familiar that brain-machine interfaces are actually a thing? You've seen these, right? They're incredible. I can talk at length about what they are and what they aren't, but suffice to say that in the here and now, in the present day, they're a huge boon medically to people that have lost the ability to use substantial portions of their body. And we're going to be seeing some really exciting stuff in that line of technology over the course of the next 5 to 10 years or so. Regardless of how you're providing the input to this computer, you want the machine to understand you. What does that mean? What does it mean for a machine to understand us? Do we even understand us? This is the subject of entire graduate courses in college. This is not, the question of does a human being actually understand another human being? Do they understand themselves? What is language actually transmitting? Just by a show of hands, how many people here know what Wittgenstein's beetle is? Awesome. That's the right answer. For the camera, nobody raised their hands, which means that only I know what my beetle is. And that is, anyway. We're not going to get into a lot of we're not here to teach a course on philosophy, but we do have to at least skim the question, what even is language anyway? I would like to give you guys a tentative functional definition of language that I don't know will ever be useful outside this course, but it's at least what we're going to work with for now. Language is a set of symbols that one being can emit for the exclusive purpose of inducing a change in the internal state of another being. What does any of that mean? When I talk about a being, I'm actually talking about something pretty simple. It's any person, plant, animal, plant, bacterium, machine, whatever, any system that has the following characteristics. It has inputs in the form of either sensory organs or sensors. It's got outputs in the form of either muscles or motors or whatever, lights flashing on a screen. and it's got some kind of internal state that is affected by the inputs and that in turn affects the outputs. Pretty straightforward stuff, I would like to think, yes? Okay. By symbols, I'm referring to anything that can affect the input modalities of the being that we just described. This can be sounds, this can be visual patterns, this can be colors, this can be odors. Take this being right here, for example. What's it doing? It's howling, it's making a sound. This being right here, what's it doing? It's changing color. Back in my graduate studies were in neuroscience, specifically in invertebrate neurophysiology. And so I don't know anything about rats or monkeys, but I can talk your ear off about octopuses. And that's not actually an octopus, that's a cuttlefish. And they have W-shaped pupils that can perceive polarization, but another time. Yeah, right. This is a bacterium. When a colony of bacteria, specifically in something called a biofilm. Does anyone know what a biofilm is? It's the house it lives in. Not just a house, but a fortress. When a bacterium is in danger, such as when it's being eaten by a white blood cell or whatever, it exudes a hormone that signals to nearby bacteria of the same strain to start emitting this like crusty, viscous goop that physically impedes the approach of whatever microbiological predator is trying to eat the colony. It basically resembles dental scrapings, and it prevents the bacteria from inside this crust from being harmed. And the bacteria that signals this might very well not survive whatever is causing the stimulus, but it does so for the express purpose of getting all of its strain mates to save themselves. This object, what does it do? Yes. What was that?
It creates a sound.
It creates a sound, a really loud one. What is its purpose in creating that sound? To create, exactly, to create a panic, or at least to create awareness on the part of humans nearby that there's a fire. When I talk about exclusive purpose, I would like to drive home that language is a subset of communication as a more general principle. I'm talking about symbols that are emitted for no reason other than to make another being know that you are emitting them. As a counterexample, to illustrate what I'm talking about, if I run away from, if a rabbit runs away from a wolf, the rabbit is communicating to the wolf, I am scared of you. But that's, in other words, the wolf knows the rabbit is scared. But that's not the rabbit's purpose in running away. The rabbit's purpose in running away is just not to be near the wolf. By another counterexample, if I give a tell in poker, I have communicated to you that I've got a great hand, but I didn't intend to communicate that. That's not part of language. That's just you being observant. The point that I'm circumlocuting around is that the emitter and the receiver have to have some kind of shared frame of reference in order to know what these symbols mean. The target will, the sender and recipient both know collectively between them that the target will receive these symbols through their sensory organs. The receiving of these symbols will affect the target in some way, and the target will infer that this was the sender's intent. It does not mean the target will obey, does not mean the target will even necessarily fully understand, but it does mean that an intentional attempt at communication is going on. There's a really interesting case study of this. Who here knows what Yucca Mountain is? Yeah. Are you familiar with the Warning Project? Okay. First, go ahead. Like, no,
Well, what is Yucca Mountain?
yeah, what is Yucca Mountain?
Yucca Mountain's where they want to store the radioactive waste, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a national repository for radioactive waste. Still, there's still a lot of debate going on around it but the general gist is that there's this big mountain in the middle of absolutely nowhere in the desert that is made of relatively easily excavatable material that that's pretty safe from human habitation. Sorry, pretty far from human habitation. That is being surveyed as a site to store all of the nation's nuclear waste. Now, the thing about nuclear waste is that it stays dangerous for tens of thousands of years. So there is a subset of the Yucca Mountain Project that's specifically involved in linguistics. They've hired linguists, symbologists, communication experts, and related professions to ask a very interesting question. What is humanity going to be like in 10,000 years? Assuming records have been destroyed, civilization has risen and collapsed possibly more than once, writing systems have been completely erased. How do you tell these people not to go into this mountain? What sort of markings do you put on or around this mountain that can communicate to them that this is a place of death, but the death isn't immediate, you're going to get really sick after a while. Don't go here. I know you're curious. I know that like you think we're superstitious by showing like all these like pictures of skeletons around here, but this wasn't some sort of religious site where you really will die if you come here. How do you even convey that and not make it a challenge that they want to overcome, you know?
Well, and if you're telling people that like death will be found behind this door, how do they know it's not a treasure map?
Yeah. It's all. Well, you know, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You know, like you can get that treasure, but natural language processing is worth like focusing in on the word natural. When computer scientists talk about languages, we talk about formal languages and programming languages. And actually, programming languages are a form of formal language, just with the compiler as the state machine. We've got, so when computers were first invented, they were designed, the first thing that they were put to use on was, actually, does anyone know like what the first electronic computers were built for?
Census taking? No.
Technically, yes.
Tabulating votes.
Technically, it was in fact Herman Hollerith's International Business Machines that gave the dawn of computing. I'm actually talking about Alan Turing and the code breaking. Exactly. For those that might not have heard the answer, the first thing that the first electronic computation device was a automatic census taker by a guy named Herman Hollerith, who eventually used the machine to apply that same process to business that allowed them to tabulate their accounting books. The company, he called it International Business Machines. You might have heard of it. My point is that like when we were first developing computers, we used them for code breaking, and so there was this terminology around then of like, well, what if we have some sort of language, meaning some sort of ciphertext, some sort of sequence of symbols, we don't know what it is, like how can we process it, like how can we represent it mathematically? And so all of this is to say that in the programming world, language means a very specific thing. So when we talk about natural languages, we're talking about languages that were not explicitly designed for computers to process. For a non-technical audience, the natural part might be redundant, but it just, you know, the folks that are actually building these things think of language as this. Language is ubiquitous throughout the animal kingdom. In fact, as I've already shown, like even bacteria have a sort of form of communication that can be regarded as language. Y'all can see these pictures, right? So because we are mammals and because we are, alive, we can. It's pretty clear to us what the creatures in these slides are communicating. What's these guys saying? Feed me, exactly. What's this guy saying? I mean, it's written right there. Run, save yourselves. I had a photo of a fight between a water buffalo and a lion that was unfortunately too gory. My girlfriend vetoed it and said you cannot include that in the slide. But I did want to mention that water buffalo have an interesting instinct called a death bellow, which is when you know about this? Let's tell about it.
I don't think I know enough to tell about it.
All right.
I've seen videos. Don't they have a death bellow to warn other herd mates that
Yes.
danger is imminent, I'm on my way out, you should probably go?
Yeah, the last thing a water buffalo does when it's being killed is honks unbelievably loudly. That's all you can hear in the savannah. And this summons all of its herd mates, right? They're incredibly aggressive, and the last thing a lion wants to encounter is 200 angry water buffalo. The water buffalo will win that fight. They're vicious. So lions have to learn how to attack water buffalo in teams, with one grabbing the snout, keeping it from screaming, and even that doesn't really work most of the time. Speaking of savanna creatures, what's this guy saying? This might be a little obscure. Good morning. Right? Elephants will usually trumpet in order to assemble the rest of their herd. The idea is that they're foraging animals, and when one of them finds a really juicy patch of stuff to eat, they will trumpet to the rest of the herd for them to know to come over. These little dudes. Or these little ladies, rather. I know where the nectar is. Yep. A significant part of the honeybee wiggle language was decoded by Professor Gene Robinson at the University of Illinois, which I had the pleasure of working under and can tell stories. How about this guy?
He's upset.
He's upset, yes.
He's hungry too.
What state is he trying to induce in the target of this communication? Yeah. My one and only.
Hey, sailor.
An inordinate amount of effort in the animal kingdom is devoted to this. And according to Freud, everything that we do basically 24/7 is some sublimation or manifestation of that in one form or another. What about this guy? Yeah. What state is he trying to induce in the recipient of this communication? Sympathy, exactly. Now, this one might be a little bit more subtle, but look at this guy. You've been watching him for a while now. Boom. Just looks you right in the eye, looks you right in the eye. Oh, this is your glass? Is this your glass? Is it? Oh gosh, would suck if that happened, wouldn't it? What is he communicating? I don't care. I outrank you. Your wellness is irrelevant to me. You are a servant to me. And cats pretty much have that down pat. In the mammalian world and ornithoid worlds, a lot of communication is devoted to establishing social hierarchy. In reptiles, I'm not sure. Anyway, so you've seen what language looks like in animals. Here's what language looks like in humans. Cedric, or should we have an audience member read the little story excerpt? What do you think?
Oh, we can have that. Well, I think it's faster if I do it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. When Sonai was old enough, his sisters begged their parents to let them also travel to see the world. But their mother, Rain, was afraid she would lose them all and refused. However, an acquaintance, Hyena, had looked upon the two daughters and found them fair. Disguising his wicked heart, he said to the father, "Pray let them go, it will be good for their education, and I myself will go with them to look after them." So the father gave them permission in spite of his wife's grief, and off they went, full of happiness.
That's from an ancient San fable, an ancient fable of the San people called Rain and Her Son. Now, I'd like you to think about what we just heard. I'd like you to think about the fact that we heard it. The fact that I'm conveying this to you as a story and I'm talking about it as a story and so on. And now compare it to the communication modalities that we're seeing here. To say that it's a larger order of magnitude is an understatement. We're able to express, just in this passage alone, we see expressions of statements of conditions of being other than the speaker, something that you do not see on the previous slide. We're seeing statements of non-present condition. We're talking about things that happened in the past. They went full of happiness. The future, I myself will go with them. And think about what's going on there. This is a storyteller telling a story that happened in the past in which somebody talks about something that will happen then in the future. This story has hypotheticals and conditionals. She would lose them all if certain things came to pass. We see statements of how some beings' conditions are perceived and in some cases intentionally altered by others. His sisters begged their parents, disguising his wicked heart, in spite of his wife's grief. These are awarenesses that one being has of the state of another, and we are here listening to them.
Now, do we infer that because the story is called Rain and Her Son, the daughters don't make it?
I actually didn't read the end of the story. I don't know. So I can't tell you whether it's a good one or not. But it's so far beyond anything that you can even teach other animals to do. I mean, you hear about chimps that have been trained in sign language with vocabularies of upwards of like 70 words. Doesn't matter. They can't do this. Humans are the best linguists in the known universe. And the known universe only includes Earth, sure, as far as we know. But we have, compared to anything else we know of, animals, plants, machines, whatever, we have an enormous symbol vocabulary that we can put into structured grammars for conveyance of unbelievable levels of information. We use verb tenses to establish chronology and order and pattern. And most importantly, we've got an incredibly high resolution ability to model the state of other beings who are receiving our communications, including other humans who are, in turn, hearing our communications and modeling us in turn. Narrative language, the ability to convey stories, is basically a Homo sapiens superpower. You know, like nothing that part of the reason why I can never get into the Marvel universe is that nothing that is depicted with these like mutant X-Men powers, for me at least, comes anywhere close to the sheer awe of an actual mutation that occurred somewhere between 2 million and 500,000 years ago that enabled us to do this. Humans use language to transfer life experiences from one individual to another. I can tell you about my life. Your parents and grandparents can tell you about their lives. In all other animals, 99% of what they learn in their lifetime dies with them. A mother deer can teach her children, can teach her foals where to graze, what sort of sounds to avoid, what to be scared of. A father elephant can teach his sons how to attract female elephants by just doing what I do, so to speak. But the vast majority of their life experiences, what they've seen, where they've been, how they've felt, who they've known, dies with them. Storytelling and writing permit an individual human to make their experiences outlast their biological confines. And that's why images such as such as this picture of the San people gathered around the fire telling their stories, is so incredibly valuable, and something that we, gathered around an electronic fire right here, continue to do to this day. This superpower grants humans the ability, and pretty much this alone, not the thumb, not the wheel, fire to a certain extent, but we wouldn't know how to continue making fire if we couldn't talk to one another. This grants humans the ability to build upon discoveries of past generations and to use that accumulated knowledge to craft tools and structures of iteratively increasing complexity, and for each of us to indirectly live forever. We achieve this through a set of highly specialized neural structures that are very rare in the animal kingdom, or in the universe as we know it, for that matter. This one is present in all mammals, but is by far the largest as a percentage as a percentage of brain mass in humans. The other two that I'll talk about are unique to humans. This is the prefrontal cortex. It sits right behind your eyes and up through your forehead. And it goes back roughly to about your temples or so. It's a three-dimensional structure, so that's a bit of an oversimplification, but you get the idea. It is responsible for planning and calculation. Its job is described as an executive function by neurologists and cognitive scientists. A subset or ramification of the ability to perform executive function is it can infer the internal states of other things and people. And that could mean everything from, I wonder what's under that log that's rustling in the grass right there, all the way to, I wonder what that jerk has in his card hand. The ability to model and conceive of and probabilistically estimate unobservable internal states extends, like I mentioned, to other people who are also doing the same thing to us. It's this structure that's responsible for our ability to perform social maneuvering and as well as construction and calculus and physics. Oh, did the cat stop jumping?
It did.
Oh.
So good.
All right. Sorry, I wonder why it did that. That's a shame. Anyway, if you, I could be getting this wrong, but if you start at the middle of your ear and trace back to just behind the ear, right to where your cranium starts to curve back behind your head, you're in the proximity of something called, I guess you have to go up a little bit too. You're in the proximity of something called Wernicke's area.
Just a side question. How many people here took Magical Worlds? Hey, how many people remember Wernicke and Broca? Oh, yeah.
Okay. I know that the course description talked about Broca's area. I wasn't sure if it talked about Wernicke's at all.
Roy's talked about it. I'm just, but this is a good review.
All right. Okay. I didn't want to be wasting your time, but if you're, all right. Wernicke's area is largely responsible for connecting words, whether they be written or sign languaged or spoken, to the concepts and ideas that those words represent. The Wernicke's area is what's responsible for the integration of context and subject matter. It's how you know that when you say the word story, Wernicke's area is what allows you to know that you're talking about one thing if the context of that word is tales and myths and legends, and a different thing if you're talking about buildings. A story of a building, right? Damage to Wernicke's area results in something called fluent or receptive aphasia. We don't know how these neural structures work internally. We've barely begun to really understand their connectivity patterns. Most of our understanding of what they do comes from observation of people who have suffered a stroke or other head trauma, so that we know what they can't do when these areas are damaged. So Wernicke's area results in something called fluent or receptive aphasia. It's characterized by a difficulty to understand others and, interestingly enough, speech with a very natural rhythm and fluidity, but without any underlying meaning. This dovetails with lyrical delight, where a machine is producing rhythm and pattern and word, but it has no concept of what those words mean. It's simply rolling with established sequences. When this happens, this is because the Broca's area, which we'll talk about next, is basically the wheel is spinning, but the hamster's dead. Now, I don't know, Cedric, I know, should we break exactly at noon?
12:30 is a good
Okay,
point.
12:30 is good.
Yeah.
I'd like to break somewhere between now and 12:30.
Right.
Is that good by you guys?
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to take just a few minutes to listen to what fluent or receptive aphasia sounds like. Did you guys do this in the previous course, or okay? First, I'm going to play an actor's rendition on the show House. It's more pronounced and obvious than a real case because the actor is accentuating it, but the gist is pretty good. Now let's see if the audio system actually works. Wait, get back. Okay, pardon me.
Mr. Stone, you think you're speaking normally, but your speech is impaired. He knows what he wants to say, but when he reaches for a word, he finds something else.
I grapple average. Tens are glisten.
He doesn't know that he's saying it wrong?
It all sounds right to him.
Now, notice that I love that description because it's pretty spot on. When he reaches for a word, he finds something else. That's what damage to Wernicke's area does. It breaks the connection between word forms and the meaning that they connect to. Here is a clinical patient, actually a research patient, who was interviewed by a research scientist. We're not going to watch this whole clip, but you'll get the idea pretty fast, I think.
What's this?
You know, the big end right there, end of the football.
End of the football?
It influenced the football right here. The cause that it comes in, see?
Yeah.
The end of it, see? Yeah. Oh, we have all of these, see?
I don't understand.
Well, it's pliable in the other, see? You don't understand it, but it applies in the long thread reed comes from there. And it comes source from the country out through it, see? All the under it, see, it comes up and finally...
I think that's enough of that. That's honestly kind of painful to watch. I don't know about you guys, but... This next one is a clinical patient who's been working with his therapist for, I think this is their 3rd year. Because the previous one was a scientist, like a research scientist, and this one is a therapist, is I think a little bit more sympathetic to the patient here. But you'll notice that he's already been recovering for a while.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
So we're on a cruise and we're about to
We
get to
will
Juneau.
store it right here and they'll save their hands right there for them.
And what were we just doing with the iPad?
Right at the moment, they don't show a darn thing.
With the iPad that we were doing. Like here?
I'd like my change for me and change hands for me.
All right, that's enough. You get the idea. So he's at least able to make word forms, unlike the previous patient. But as you can see, like, he clearly has trouble understanding the conversant and the conversationalist, and his ability to generate seemingly grammatically coherent sentences is unimpaired. But there's nothing in those sentences. Again, if you may see why I'm covering this, because you already have seen Lyrical Delight, and you'll see that there's a lot of parallels between what you're seeing here and what we'll see as we study NLP a little bit more in depth. On the flip side, there's Broca's area, which actually not on the flip side. It's the function of Broca's area in the absence of Wernicke's support is what we were seeing in the past slides. Broca's area is responsible for the comprehension of structured grammar, the connection between a pronoun to an antecedent, for example. You might have noticed those patients were able to keep grammatically structurally relevant keywords, such as to the, or on, or in. That's actually because they're part of English language infrastructure. And you can't generate, Broca's area can't generate a certain rhythm that it intends without those words being there. Damage to Broca's area results in a couple of things. Can't find the right tense of a word, first of all. The patients can generally still communicate in words, but obviously without grammar, which means without temporal sense, without meaning conveyed through conjugation. And they can understand people speaking pretty well, but they lose nuance when dealing with conditionals or past or future tenses. So a Broca's area patient can understand, let's go to the store, but they might have trouble understanding, if it's raining, would you prefer to go to the store? This guy has been, from the same therapy group, by the way, Tactus Energy, or therapy, has been working with his, well, I'll let him talk.
Can you tell us your name?
Mike Caputo.
And Mike, when was your stroke?
I was 7 years ago.
Okay.
And
what did you used to do?
Remember, here Broca's area is damaged, so we're hearing speech output only from Wernicke's area without Broca's area modulation.
Worked Autodesk, seven sales and worldwide, and very good, yeah.
Okay, and who are you looking at over there when you turn your head?
That's my wife.
Okay, and why is she helping you to talk?
She's a speech.
So you have trouble with your speech?
Yeah.
And what's that called?
Aphasia.
All right. And so why don't you work now?
I do.
And what do you do now?
Voices of hope.
Look at how much effort it took him to just structure that one sentence. I do. Subject, verb. That's enough of that for now.
Does this affect written language as well?
Very good question. I believe yes, but the effects on written language are not quite as It has very closely related but slightly different effects on written language that I'm afraid I'm not familiar enough with to talk about competently.
Can they sing?
That's a very good question.
Because singing comes from a different part of the brain.
That's a very good question.
There's a book called The Man Who Could Taste Shapes that actually, when I went to work for Roy, he had me read it because people sent him so many books about the brain and that sort of thing that was one of the ones that he gave to me. And yes, people can sing quite capably because, as pointed out, it's a different area of the brain.
That's extraordinary.
Doesn't that tie in with the fact of how people can actually then play music as well, the same way?
So the deal is that damage to neither Wernicke's nor Broca's area completely knocks out a person's ability to communicate. It only affects their it only affects a very specific cognitive task, which is language. Turns out that they can still understand picture diagrams, for example, and this gets into a really big set of kind of controversial topics about whether or not Broca's and Wernicke's stroke sufferers can give consent to medical procedures, because they're still medically competent. They're still they're mentally still there, but their ability to express themselves with language has been compromised in various ways. So it's not that they don't understand the implications of their conditions and what various surgeries and therapies can do for them. It's that the ability, it's that it's unclear how well a physician can convey to them what these therapies will involve in order to get their consent. So it's a bunch of very interesting questions. Did that? Okay. When it's all working when it's all working correctly, when it's all working correctly, it achieves extraordinary things. Humans are exceptionally clever little monkeys. When humans live in groups and use language to communicate with one another in the same group, we learn one another's nuances and flavors and implications and so on. So this means that language within groups ends up getting more and more efficient as time goes on, and more nuance and subtext is added over time. Conveying meaning becomes steadily more rich, and groups will spontaneously develop things like slang, inside jokes, and it's like, who here has heard of twin languages? Most people. Anyone want to say what a twin language is with the speaking box?
Okay, if nobody else does it.
No, right behind you.
Oh, behind. There you go, Chris.
Twin language is a language that is developed by typically fraternal twins, I believe it is, that, no, maternal twins. Where
identical twins.
Identical twins,
yes.
Yeah. Where they have a series of words and expressions and motions that make up their own language that is only understood by the two of them.
Exactly. Twin languages and to a much smaller extent, you see similar kinds of things with children who were very close growing up together. Twin languages actually have their own grammars and vocabularies. These are things that two little humans just spontaneously develop all by themselves with their neural structures working properly. I don't know if any of y'all are actually a fan of Star Trek, but this is a great little clip.
Why did you choose to study the concept
Just give this a minute.
of authority and leadership?
Because our species has no such concepts. As we are all identical, distinctions among ourselves are meaningless. Hence we have no leaders, no followers. We wanted to examine the nature of command. Our replicas of Fall and Dizak explored this issue on Mizar 2 and on Chalma, just as our Picard replica did on the Enterprise. Your responses were most intriguing.
You have no right to put us through this just to satisfy your curiosity.
Why not?
Because kidnapping is an immoral assault. The rights of other races must be respected.
This concept of morality is a very interesting human characteristic. We shall have to study it sometime.
Now, Mr. Wolf.
What is it? Why do you hold us?
Because there is something else you can learn. With an alert crew, even our primitive vocal communications are unnecessary. With a single look, I was able to inform my crew that I wanted to hold you here.
But why?
Because I've decided
All right, that's
to
enough.
conduct
Made my point. Unless y'all want to watch the rest of the episode, I'm happy to. Why am I not full screen anymore? There we go. My point is that natural language happens naturally. It's innately human. It arises by itself in human groups, and it cannot typically be, and it cannot really be confined to a rigid vocabulary or syntax. Humans will recognize the confines of the language and will use the confines as part of that language. We're more than happy to take what we know other humans expect us to communicate as and then break those expectations for very specific effect, such as surprise or humor or some kind of social advantage. In doing so, the confines of the language become extensions of the language, and it's like trying to pin down a water balloon that just kind of keeps sliding out whenever you try to poke it. How many of y'all watched the show Buffy? I mean, this isn't a very good clip of it, but
Well, I'll just jump off that bridge when I come to it.
I'll just.
Well, I'll just jump off that bridge when I come to it.
You know, I just like it because it takes the expectation of two completely different idioms, mashes them together in a way that still conveys a pretty concrete concept and is still consistent with the meaning of the idioms. For those that didn't watch Buffy back in the day, the show kind of became famous for having a particular way of speaking that that just used a lot of verbal linguistic surprise that ended up making all sorts of layers of nuance and sense when you really thought about it given a second. For a machine to understand human language, what that means is that it has to be able to participate in it. It has to be able to model the internal state of the speaker or listener and model how words and intonations will affect that cognitive state. If it's able to model a listener or recipient to that fidelity, then it's already reached the level of cognition of a person. The technology isn't there yet. I fully expect that it will get there in our lifetimes. We may be looking 20, 30 years down the road, but it is not around the corner, and it's going to be an interesting ride. The idea of the some of you may be surprised that I would put the timetable like quite that far out, because you read in the media about AI breakthrough A, AI breakthrough B, and so on. We can talk offline if you like, but that's my guess. The idea of a machine being cognitively and thereby linguistically equivalent to a human is called the Turing test. And why don't we talk about the Turing test after we come back from lunch? Thank you.